Hello, Reptile Entrepreneurs. This is Bill Strand, and we are continuing the discussion of YouTube and podcast. And you notice I'm not saying YouTube or podcast. I'm saying YouTube and podcast because there is a relationship between them that we can use in today's world. And I have on Jeremey Turgeon from Reptile Talk. Jeremey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, man. I'm super excited to be here.
All right. Well, you are specifically chosen for this topic because you have a traditional podcast and a YouTube, and they're very well meshed together. So could we just start off? Tell us about Reptile Talk, how it started and what it is for the people who haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So Reptile Talk, I started it originally almost 10 years ago. And so I was 17, 18, maybe a little older. And basically the idea for it was myself and my co-host at the time, Stephen Tillis. We were younger guys that had our foot in the door with some of the legends of reptile keeping, Kevin McCurley, Eugene Bissett, Brian Barczyk, all these guys. And we're like, man, we're lucky enough to be able to just pick up the phone and talk to these people or go to their places. And the vast majority of the industry isn't able to do that. So it'd be great to just talk to some of these guys and really get their voice out there, outside of maybe their traditional social media platform, if they even had one. So that was the original premise for it. And then Steve and I both went off to college and couldn't keep up with the rigorous schedule of school and trying to put together a podcast. And back then we were also using Blog Talk Radio was the host site then. And so you got to call in. Both people are calling in, and you're praying to God nobody loses service on their phone. So I put it down for a few years, and then when I started working at Nerd, I don't want to say I had more free time because that certainly wasn't the case, but I had a more consistent schedule. Beforehand, I was doing music full time, both teaching and performing, so my schedule was all over the place. So when I decided to bring it back, Steve is actually still in school working on his doctorate's degree right now. So he's like, dude, I don't have the time. Like, there's no way I can make that happen. So I was, again, working at Nerd, and I asked Rob Christian, who I've known for many, many years. I'm like, hey, man, I want to bring the podcast back. And, it seems like it's a lot easier to do these days. So would you be interested in doing it with me? And Rob, very similarly to Steve, has a massive network of people all across the industry. So it was like, yeah, man, let's do it. But we didn't want to make it let's interview a breeder and ask them how they breed, their ball pythons or how they breed their green tree bass. There's enough of that. There's already plenty of other places for that. But what there isn't a whole lot of is podcasts talking with these people, listening to their stories. And I think Rob and I both had really similar upbringings in reptiles where, we would ask questions, but the stories that we'd end up hearing along the way were oftentimes more impactful to our education in reptiles. So that was the whole premise as we revived the Reptile Talk podcast, where we want to talk to these guys and maybe ask them some breeding questions, especially if they're working with odd species. But we want to get to know the person on a deeper level. And oftentimes, that sheds light on something that we never would have even thought to talk about if we were just like, well, please tell me how you set up this cage for your green tree python. So that was the overall premise. And, we're 94 episodes in. We're going to be working on episodes 95 and 96. We're hitting that 100 mark, man, real soon. So I'm super excited about it. But that was the premise for the podcast.
So what inspired you? And let's set the stage for those who don't know the way podcasts work. It's a heck of a lot of work, and not a whole lot of money comes back in. Usually zero.
Yeah, exactly.
What inspired you to take this on?
It's just kind of a passion project, in all honesty. I think the other social media platforms, YouTube, obviously everybody knows you can make a large sum of money doing YouTube videos and stuff. And you can make money now on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. That wasn't necessarily the goal for this. The goal was to spread a bit of education and knowledge of the people that you may end up interacting with, either to purchase an animal from or somebody who might become a resource for you later on. Like I said, Rob and I both have really extensive networks in the industry, as we've both been keeping for over 20 years. And, some of these people that we know aren't on social media. Maybe they wrote a book, at one point, if you remember how to use a book, but in all other instances, you might not ever get the chance to listen to them or really ever get the chance to talk to them outside of maybe a quick exchange of a comment on Facebook if they're on social media. So being able to provide a resource was really the main goal. That was the main inspiration for this. Is like, we've been lucky to know the people we know and talk with those people, but it seems selfish to just have that for us. If we can provide even just an hour of that person talking and sharing their experiences to the rest of the keepers that are out there, that's what makes it worth it for us.
And is that what keeps you going? I mean, you're coming up to 100 episodes, and that is well past the point of initial energy of, oh, wow, we're going to be doing something. And you have already hit the point of, oh, my goodness, what do I do now? And how long am I going to be doing this? So you've obviously gotten to that point and maybe gotten through it. What keeps you going and what drives you? Where are you going towards?
Yeah, so I think that's a two-parter for us, mostly because I still work as a musician, so my schedule is far from consistent. When we first got into it, we were both working at Nerd, so it was really easy. We were like, okay, hey, look, we both get out, a little early on Wednesdays, so let's make Wednesdays our recording day. We can book this once a week. We can just bing, bang, boom, get this done. And, we've both left Nerd and both have very different schedules now, so it's been a challenge to keep things up and consistent. I think the nice thing has been, Wednesdays were like, okay, cool, we're going to record a podcast. That's what we have to look forward to at the end of the day, which was awesome. Now it's, hey, we're going to record a podcast. It might have been like 2 weeks or a little more in certain instances if I'm on the road for a while since we've recorded one. So now the energy comes right back and almost feels like we're starting fresh again, so to speak. So I think that's where the energy really pushes us. And then I don't want to say that we're gatekeeping as far as who we bring on or who we let on the podcast, but we are very specific with who we decide to speak to for multiple reasons. We again want to be utilized as a resource for people to come check out and meet people who have been in the industry for a long period of time. So we're not necessarily looking to speak to, the new breeder on the block, like that isn't necessarily what interests us. So the people that we do end up talking to are people that we're already excited to talk about or talk with, so I think that's what helps keep us in that momentum of just like, hey, we're doing another episode. It's going to be awesome. And I think that's a vital thing. You have to talk to somebody that you actually want to talk to, especially if your podcast lasts for, I'll say more than 5 minutes. So,
yeah. All right. So we're going to take a little bit of break from talking about that podcast. You keep talking about a music career, and I see this name Brass Man.
Yes.
What do you do in your real life?
So honestly, my life is literally just based of reptiles and music. That's literally it. So I'm a professional trumpet player and vocalist. That's I went to Berklee College of Music. So I studied that. I just recently made a post on Facebook, actually, of my most up-to-date discography. I've worked on nearly 24 records with different artists, some local to me, some international artists, some jazz legends, and finalists from The Voice and all that stuff. So that's kind of my thing. I actually just got back from Atlanta last night. I was working on an album down in Atlanta. So that's what I do when I'm not playing with snakes, is I'm playing music somewhere.
Okay. Oh, that that just sounds exciting.
It's awesome, man. It's super hectic, and I don't think I'm very used to it because I've been doing it for so long now. But it took me a while to really get into a groove that made sense. It's also one of the reasons why in my personal collection of animals, I only keep snakes. Because sometimes I'm away for a week, sometimes a little more at a time, and lizards and frogs and stuff like that, they need that consistent attention. The snakes, if I'm away for a little more than a week, Rob lives fairly close to me, so I can call him up and say, hey man, I'll give you a few dollars for gas or whatever. Can you come just make sure stuff has water and make sure there's no poop smeared everywhere, so the snakes are way more tolerant of my career choices.
All right, so let's go back to that your podcast, Reptile Talk.
Yes.
You have it comes out. It is officially a podcast. It's hosted on a podcast service, and it is released as a YouTube video. Could you share your thinking with the idea in mind that you're talking to people that may be going through the same process right now? As in, I want to do a show. Should I do it as a podcast, YouTube, both? What was your thinking?
So originally when we started the podcast, we were just doing audio only. So we were doing pre-recorded episodes that we would just upload and release through Buzzsprout. And that was all we were doing for a while. And actually, Donnie, the camera guy at Nerd, was like, you guys got to get yourselves onto YouTube. Like, you just need to. It's such a vital part of the social media world. And, that's where so many people go to look for things. And I put it off for a while because I was like, man, I like doing the audio only kind of vibe. It just works. It's a little less hectic, whatever. And he just kept nagging me. Right. Yeah, exactly. It definitely is a little easier. But Donnie just kept nagging me. So I started just looking into different services and like when we spoke at Animal Con, you were talking to me about this platform, Riverside, and I had never even heard of it. I was like, I thought Buzzsprout was like almost all there was, like I had no idea. But so I talked with Rob and I was like, hey man, I've been just doing some research, investigating the YouTube potential for the podcast. And I think it would be good from a visual standpoint of being able to put a face to a name kind of deal. And I think it allows for a little bit more engagement. I think podcasting is great if you're doing the audio only way for people who are like, they're on their commute. They're, to and from work, or maybe they're just doing things around the house, on a day off and they want to listen to something. I think that's awesome. But I also feel like the video element to this adds a little bit more interactiveness, especially if you engage with the people who are watching. If you do it live, you engage with the people who are commenting and stuff. It just adds an extra level of personability. And I think that is... because now that's what we do for every episode. And I think that element adds so much to podcasting. So I can't necessarily suggest doing one or the other because I feel like everybody's going to have their own personal feelings on either or. But I've learned going from, I think it was like our first 35 episodes were audio only, transitioning over to YouTube. I've enjoyed doing it live on YouTube as well as being able to release an audio version more than just recording the audio version. I'm a fairly introverted person, but when I'm talking about snakes or music, that's when, I'm in my zone and I'm like, yeah, let's hang out, let's talk, so I want to see the person I'm talking to, and I just want to feel like I'm enjoying that company a little bit more. I think about, just before coming on here, I was on FaceTime with a friend of mine, and it's just that personability, that connection, I feel like is just greater having the video element.
All right. You mentioned live videos, and that throws in whole nother aspect to making these shows. So introduce us to how you do your live and why, what benefit you get from that.
So I think a couple things. So we decided to do it live for the interaction purposes. We already had built up a decent, following of people who were listening on a consistent basis. So we wanted to give them the chance to interact with both us and our guest if we were going to have a guest. So, and I'll also preface by saying we weren't expecting anything to go perfectly. Which, I mean, if you're doing video, that's challenge enough. But if you're going to do live video and you want it to go smoothly and perfectly, it's not going to happen, man. It's not going to happen. So be willing to go into it knowing something's probably going to get messed up, and that's okay. As a matter of fact, our last episode, the first, I think, 5 minutes of it, I was having microphone issues. It sounded like I was like a crackling robot. And I'm like, we're 90-something episodes in. How have I not dialed this in yet?
Jeremy, I had a live session on Saturday mornings. I do a live session. And I brought a guest. Things were going great. And all of a sudden, it kicked me off. And so me, the host, I'm off. Yeah. It's still live. My guest is saying, hello? Okay, guys, it's Bill. My guest had to carry the show for like 5-10 minutes while I had to totally redo my system. To this day, I've never seen that happen again, and I have no idea what happened.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So anybody who wants to do live video, get ready for something to go wrong.
Yes. So when you started doing your live video, how much interaction did it get? I mean, how long did it take before people said, "Hey, okay, I like this"?
Yeah, it took probably a few episodes. The biggest thing became we needed to promote it and tell people like when it was going to happen. That's partly where my music career comes in handy, because I've got to promote my own shows, and I've kind of learned like good windows of time to start promoting things. When to give people enough of a time to plan their schedule to be able to come check you out. So I'd say within probably like 5 or 10 episodes of live stream video, we had anywhere between 15 and 30 viewers, which we weren't expecting hundreds. But we were praying for more than 5. So, and it's been pretty consistent through that, even with us not uploading on a consistent basis anymore. With enough promotion to our audience, we'll get, anywhere from 20 to 50 people, also depending upon our guest, the popularity of our guest.
Yeah, you interviewed Phil Gus from USARK, and boy, that was a hopping chat.
Yeah, it was awesome, and that's one of the things that I love too. Is I think both Rob and I have worked on and off with Phil for the better part of the last decade. And when we decided to bring back the podcast, Phil was one of the first people I reached out to. USARK plays such a vital role, and most people don't get the chance to speak to him unless they're going to a big show or they send an email and he's actually able to get to it. So I was like, man, let's use this platform as a way to talk about that stuff and bring Phil on and have people get that interaction. And Phil's just a great guy. He's got a great sense of humor. He is. He knows his stuff, and he will also very readily engage, with people in the comment section and stuff. The other aspect of this too is, as we were saying before, like often the podcasting world is a labor of love. We don't really see any financial return on that. The live stream video stuff on YouTube allows people to send super chats, which does become some bit of a financial help. In some instances, more episodes on certain episodes more than others. But like when we have Phil on, we'll do all of those super chats go right to USARK. So once that kicks into my bank account, it's like, okay, cool, right to USARK it goes, and that's been a great resource, And outside of that, Rob and I were really just concerned about being able to cover the fees for the hosting site and stuff like that. So as long as we can cover that, we're fine. Like as long as we're not losing money. That's basically what we both said.
StreamYard is not cheap. When you do a live streaming service, that's not cheap. So you're starting to get some cost involved there.
Yeah, exactly. But luckily, I mean, like I said, we've had a solid amount of attendance on each one of our episodes, and people know that we'll be very much engaged, and we have some core supporters that will throw us something on a super chat or something like that, and they all know it goes right to maintaining doing the podcast, and when we have Phil or anybody from US Arc Florida, then it goes right to that, so they know we're very transparent about where that money's going. It's not lying in my pockets. I'm not here to get rich or anything like that. We just want to bring great content to our listeners.
Okay, so you have YouTube and or maybe a live session as well as a podcast episode released. Take us through the steps of from point zero. We have no episode. What are the steps you go through to put together an episode, and at the end you have these outputs, these deliverables?
Yeah. So when we first started, obviously we've got nothing. I'm a musician and audio nerd, so I have audio interfaces, headphones, microphones. I've got all of that stuff already in the house.
You're like the XLR type guy, aren't you?
Oh yes. That's right. When we had that panel discussion, I was like, I know what all of this is. This is
pretty hoity-toity over there.
Yeah, man. I've got my Sennheiser E835 dynamic microphone, and no, so I already had a whole bunch of that gear, and because of that, I also had different recording software. And literally our first few episodes where I was plugging my phone into an input jack on the interface. So that was how we were getting our guests on, because we were doing pre-recorded audio. Yeah. So that was how I was doing all of that. And it had its challenges, for sure.
Yeah, I bet.
But I'm also, again, musician, so I'm an audio nut. So if there were, I'm making notes along the way if there's something that needs to be edited. I'm listening to the playback. I've got a couple big JBL speakers here, so I'm listening to playback for hours, going through and geeking out. I'm doing the extra stuff. I was very extra. Sometimes Rob would hang out after we would record, and I'd be like an hour in just editing things, and he's like, all right, man, I think I'm going to go home. I'm like, okay, that's fine, man. It'll be up in an hour, But that was literally how we started, because we were still trying to figure things out. Again, when I first started Reptile Talk, it was Blog Talk Radio, so you're just sitting on the phone, looking dumb for an hour. So for this, it was like, okay, let me figure out how we can make this work. Well, I've got all this recording software. I think it'll just be as simple as plug and play, pretty much, and then just edit the audio, which it pretty much was. And then we just needed to find a hosting site to be able to get it out to people. So I came across Buzzsprout, looked at the reviews, saw that the reviews were really good, and I was like, hey, let's give it a shot. It's fairly inexpensive. So let's just make it happen. And we did. And then after that, it was just about promotion. Telling our audiences that we were putting together a podcast and they should go check it out. Luckily for Rob and I, between our Instagrams and Facebooks, we have probably in the realm of like between 30 and 40,000 people that follow us. So it was really easy to just be like, hey, go check this out, and then you get, even if it's only 1,000 of 40,000, that's still 1,000 people. Think about how many times people just start an account on any social platform, they make a post and they're like, I didn't get any likes, because you have to get there. You've got to get to that point. So that was a big help for us, was already having that foundation outside of the podcast realm. And as podcasting has gotten more popular, it's really not difficult to convince people to go check out a podcast. They're like, oh, I like you guys. I want to check this out.
Well, let's talk about podcasting. That it's a very curious situation, to where it's been around since 2005, somewhere around there, and it is wildly popular to a small amount of people, and that small amount of people starts to grow. But it's fascinating to me that the podcast can be these people. It's our entire life. We just get caught up in podcasts. There's podcasts about everything. We can spend our entire day podcasting. I used to hate my commute, and now and it got to the point where I loved when traffic happened, and I was going to be my half-hour commute was going to be an hour commute, because that would mean more podcast time, and I loved it. So we just get so caught up in it. But then it's like night and day. You go to somebody else and they say podcast. I don't know. I think I've seen those before. Yeah. So we have this huge disparity in the world. And so what do you see in that? And And then the follow-up question is going to be, what is the value of a podcast?
Yeah, so I think I think you're exactly right. You've got the people that are, dead into it. Like, man, podcasts are awesome. I listen to them all the time. And then you've got the total opposite side of the spectrum that's like, what a Peapod? What's happening? So it's I think our job, right, starts to become, okay, well, how do we get these non-podcasters into our circle, right? And I think that's the best part of where podcasting is right now, is the fact that there are topics people talk about that span every thought process possible, pretty much, from all the way from, Joe Rogan talking with celebrities and all of that stuff, to us guys geeking out about reptiles, and pretty much everything in between. So then it's just a matter of, some people would prefer to see a YouTube video. Other people would prefer to listen audio only. So I feel like as the podcaster, we also have to be willing to spread ourselves to as many different platform areas as possible, so that it's not, if somebody's way more content on spending the time listening via video and watching somebody, or they would just rather listen on their commute or while they're doing stuff around the house, being able to service both of those people, I think is important for us to be able to do. The old joke, I have a face for radio. Well, okay, sorry, man. Like, put on a mask or something and put yourself on YouTube.
Yeah. So why do you think it is that you hear podcasters, a lot of the discussion amongst podcasters is, I got to get my show on YouTube, but you don't hear people on YouTube saying, I got to do a podcast. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's just two very different worlds. Right, if you're on YouTube, you're not, in most cases, it's certainly not 100% the case, but I feel like in most cases, people aren't starting a podcast on YouTube. They're starting a podcast, in their kitchen with a friend. They buy, a pair of $50 USB microphones, and they just talk, and they find some way to put it out, and then it grows from there, but they're not necessarily putting it out on video. If you're jumping into YouTube, you're probably sitting there scrolling on your phone or your tablet, just looking at random trends that happen on social media, and you're like, oh, I could make a video like that. That's easy. So I feel like it's just two very different worlds. So I don't think you'll see oftentimes a YouTuber get really invested in podcasting and then make that switch. There are, of course, outliers to that rule. Brian Barczyk is a great example. He had all this YouTube success, and he's like, I really like podcasting, and then bam, he's got a giant room, and probably the most advanced gear of anybody in the reptile world doing podcasts. But then for podcasters, we're like, okay, this is great. I've got my audio out there. This is wonderful. But again, I think there's just that personal element of being able to see somebody's face on a screen. If you're going to just sit, maybe you're on a flight or something and you're like, I've got nothing to do, I'm just going to stare at my phone screen. You could keep your phone in your pocket and listen, to the audio, but seeing somebody's face, seeing those reactions, like it used to irk me if we would have on a guest and they would like show something or try to describe something and then we couldn't see it. And I'd be like, man, if we had it on video, we could see it. And then that gets us more excited, which is going to get our listener more excited. But if they're on the audio only, they're just like, oh, I wish I could see that because that sounds really cool. So to provide it on video, it might not be 4K clarity or whatever. But, just for them to get the idea, I feel like that's why a lot of podcasters are trying to get onto the video platform as well, just to have that personal element.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this, and I realized that when you're a YouTuber, you get your dopamine hit by analytics and deep into the analytics. Yes. And if that is your life, going to podcasting is kind of like, now I'm floating in space. I have no feedback. I have no idea. I'm just sending stuff out into the ether, and okay, I know how many people downloaded it and what countries they're from, but I have no idea what's going on. I have no feedback, no comment section, no nothing. So Yeah. So
Yeah,
you got to
exactly.
be in a special mindset to say, okay, I'm going to do podcasting.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the things too, again, learn how to learn the audience, right? Because I feel like the audience of YouTubers is maybe slightly different, not 100% different, but slightly different from the people that are just listening to podcasts.
In what way?
So one of the I feel like the people who are like, they're really like hardcore watching YouTube videos, they want to see that 10-minute little glimpse of whatever the heck is going on, and then they're like on to the next thing, almost like shorter attention span kind of deal. But the person listening to a podcast or willing to watch a podcast, they've got some attention span that they've been, able to utilize and save through the nonsense of social media getting shorter and shorter and shorter in their content format. But the one thing that I think some podcasters, not all podcasters for sure, fail to utilize is a call to action. So in social media, especially in business, we'll tell people like, hey, if you want to see, more of this, go check out my website. Or if you're on Instagram trying to promote a YouTube video, say, hey, if you want to see the rest of this, the link is in my bio. Like, go click that link. Or with a story on Instagram, you can throw up a poll or something like that, and get that engagement. So one of the things that Rob and I first started doing when we released the podcast was we would tell people, hey, if you're using Apple Podcasts, go leave us a comment, drop a rating, go help us out, because that shifts our analytics as far as viewership in different countries, what people are excited about, where we stand with other people that are kind of doing the same content in a podcast. So it's not quite as intense as, YouTube analytics or anything like that. But it's going to help you if somebody's searching up reptiles on Apple Podcasts or whatever. We want to be one of the first ones that show up. If there's a lot more engagement from your listeners there, like, oh, yeah, this is a 5-star podcast. These guys are great. These guys are great. Or the total opposite of like, this is terrible. I don't understand anything they're saying. The microphones are cracking. Like, what's going on? One of our biggest problems was as I was trying to edit all the audio, some of our master mixes were too low. So people were sending us messages and saying like, hey, you guys need to boost your audio because I've got my volume cranked all the way up and I'm still straining to hear you guys. But we wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for people leaving a couple of comments and then trying to reach out to us on social media. But I feel like that's such a vital thing to get a little bit of that feedback, especially if you're in the audio only side of doing things where you don't get that consistent feedback from a comment section.
Okay. How do you decide what episodes to do? Like right now, you've got months ahead of you. How far out do you plan, and how do you make those decisions?
When we were really on it, doing an episode, putting out an episode every week, we would sit there and be like, okay, who would be fun to talk to? Like, who are some guys? And we were able to just be like, okay, who are some of our closest friends in reptiles? Let's start there. That's the easiest place to start. Yeah. And then we were really willing to sit down and record for 3 hours, in one night if we really needed to, and we were doing the audio only. So we would, leave Nerd at 8 o'clock and then record until 11:30, and we just do 3 back-to-back. Like, okay, you call from this time to this time, and then you call from this time to this time. We'll just hit these, back-to-back-to-back. Now that we're not on it as far as a consistent schedule, it's really just a matter of trying to plan around schedules, between our schedules as the hosts and then whoever we're trying to get in as a guest. So usually Rob works a 9 to 5, so his schedule is a little more consistent than mine. So I'll be like, okay, man, when are you free? Yeah. Because since I'm self-employed, I can kind of arrange my schedule to be free for that. So he'll give me that, and then we have a list of people that we want to have on the podcast still that's like 40 or 50 people long. So then it's just a matter of like, okay, we're going to hit up these 5 people from this list and see who's available on these dates and these times. And that's been the easiest way. And sometimes, you cast that fishing rod out there and you get 1 or 2. Sometimes you get absolutely none. And you go and try again.
I know how that is.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, especially if they're not really into the podcast scene, you get people, what a podcast? What is that? How do I do that? Does it hurt?
Well, and I mean, you and I are laughing because we know the truth, but
Right.
the audience may not realize the challenge it is to get somebody to come onto a media that they're not sure of. Like podcasting is like, I don't want my face on video. Well, it's not video. No, I don't want to do it. It's like, okay, I still haven't gotten through to you that it's just a telephone call.
Yeah, exactly. And I've consistently used my good friend Limey as an example. Older gentleman, love him to death. Super sarcastic. He loves to joke around, but he also knows everybody. Knows everybody in the industry, all the bigger breeders and everything. He used to do all these US ARC auctions and everything. And I'm like, man, you've got so many stories. Like, I love going to shows and like, I'll leave my table for an hour to just go talk to him and listen to him tell stories, because I enjoy it. And I'm like, dude, we got to have you on the podcast. He's, no, it's not my thing. It's not my thing. I'm like, dude, I just talked to you on the phone yesterday. It's the same concept. I'll even bring all my gear to your house. Like, we'll just record it at your house. I don't care. No. I don't want it. It's about the animals. It's not about me. I'm like, I know it's not about you. I just want to talk. Like, I just want to talk, man. But yeah, there's definitely those people that are like, no. And it's like, but you would be so great.
Yeah. All right. So say we have somebody out there who's just starting an outreach and they say, I want to do a show, and they've got this. All right, I've got podcast, YouTube Live, Instagram, TikTok, all these different things out there that I can do. What kind of things would you tell them to consider for all these different outreaches to decide which one would be right for them?
I think it becomes a matter of you have to test the waters a little bit. And figure out where you have your niche, if you have a substantial following or a larger following on one platform versus another, start there, try something out there, and see what people's interest is, get them to provide you feedback. I think that's a great place to start. I know even while we were doing Reptile Talk, I used to do a live stream on my Instagram every Sunday night while I was just cleaning snakes. And, if somebody wanted to jump on, I would bring some people on and we'd just chat for a little bit, and then they'd go about on their way. And people would hit me up and they're like, man, this is so great. And I'd be like, well, go check out the Reptile Talk podcast because it's just the same thing. It's the same thing. But Instagram has been a very consistent thing for me platform-wise. That's where I've got most of my numbers. So it was just like, I'm just going to do this and I'll get to talk to more people than I normally would. But I feel like you have to test the waters a little bit. Or if you are like, I want to do a podcast, maybe audio only, at least just to have some content that people can listen to, record an episode or two. If you're going to have a guest, have that guest on. And then jump on to another platform where you may have a larger following and say, hey, I just started a podcast. It's available here. I'd love to know what you guys think. Go check it out and shoot me a message. I think you can utilize the vast reach of your social media outreach as a whole to help kind of steer you in the right direction. And maybe people will be like, oh, man, this is great. I would love to see what you guys are talking about. Then you'll know, okay, maybe I should look into doing something on live video via YouTube or Instagram or something like that. But there's so many outlets. It's a challenge to figure out which one to pick, which one's really good. Yeah. I think the important thing is once you've locked something in that seems to be going well, stay as consistent as possible. I think that's Rob and I have gotten really lucky as we've gotten inconsistent. And I think it's just because we have so many episodes out already before the inconsistencies started to happen, where if people just find out about us now, they've got over 90 something hours of content, where they can still catch up and listen, and that buys us a little time. But periodically we'll get people that message us and say, hey, when's the next episode coming out? Like I'm all caught up, I want the next one to come out. Which makes me feel good. I like that people have been checking it out and paying attention. But I think consistency, and this goes on so many other social media platforms, your consistency is what's going to help you build that audience. So whichever direction you take, once you've spent that time testing the waters, once you've locked it in, stick with it. Through thick or thin, just stick with it.
And for people who have been on YouTube, they create YouTube videos and such, what would you say is the value as to why they should consider a podcast? What benefit could that give them?
I think it provides an outlet for long form content that YouTube as a content creator isn't necessarily the most friendly towards as far as analytics and organic promotion. Mm-hmm. So you can utilize that. Again, Brian is a great example. He'll do a 10-minute vlog talking about, the expansion of the Reptarium, and you're only getting 10 minutes of, edited video that might have been made after 3 months of discussions and meetings and blah, blah, blah. He's not going to talk about it in a 10-minute video. Mm-hmm. But if you go listen to his podcast, that's an hour and a half, sometimes even longer, oftentimes he goes more into detail about that stuff because people leave comments on a 10-minute video and they've formed a whole idea of what he should do based off that 10-minute video. And it's like, well, check out the podcast because here's 50 minutes of me breaking it down. So I think that's the value in podcasting is it's a low impact way to have longer form content that, your real fans and supporters and listeners are going to come check out and get to know you better. And I think that's probably the most valuable part. Yeah,
I agree. So this is a good point to, I think we've gotten the message across here. Is there anything else that that you think that the world needs to know about podcasting and YouTubing?
I think honestly, it's just a different way to get your message out there. And if it's not necessarily your cup of tea, check it out, dabble in it, investigate it. There's so much that you can learn through this method of putting out content versus social media, versus Instagram, versus YouTube, versus all that other stuff. It's just different, and you'll hit a different group of people. Because even though there's crossover, there's still a bit of a difference on your audience, I feel. So don't just push it off to the side because it's not a razzle-dazzle video.
All right, so what is in the future for Reptile Talk?
Oh, man. So I'm certainly going to be investigating Riverside and seeing what that can provide for us. We have a lot of guests that we're trying to iron out details right now for when we can get them on, including like Eugene Bissett and Tom Crutchfield, and some of the older guys in the reptile industry. And I know, like we had mentioned, we had talked about at Animal Con, the great thing about this, about having the relationship with these people is they're not really on social media like that. Tom Crutchfield's probably more active on social media than any of the other older generation of reptile keepers. So we're really excited to be looking at talking with these guys that in some instances you'd never hear from unless you knew them. And getting some of their information out and their knowledge out into the world. So I think that's the era that we're going into next, is talking with that preceding generation from everything that's happening now, and just getting some of that wisdom, getting some of that knowledge, hearing about some of those mistakes that were made early on in reptile keeping, and understand why it happened that way and how that's impacted reptile keeping now. That is really exciting, and I think is something that hasn't happened enough in reptile podcasting. So that's what's coming up next. Like I said, we're just trying to iron out details and making sure that everybody understands what Wi-Fi is and how to have all that work.
Yeah, but that is one huge benefit. It's so much easier getting the, call them the older generation, the experience, and getting their information using a podcast. And that's something that I've valued so much in my Chameleon Academy podcast, is some of the old timers that have experience that I've never heard about, and I'm hearing about it the first time as I'm interviewing them and going, oh my goodness, I never realized. And it just, and if it wasn't for that podcast, all of that knowledge would literally disappear because there's no digital footprint for it.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes an invaluable resource for so many people.
It becomes an honor to be able to be part of retaining that and making sure that that doesn't just disappear.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
All right. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. I hope we have a bunch of reptile podcasts and YouTubers. We need more. The bigger we are, the stronger the community is. So everybody out there, get a podcast. All right, Jeremy.
Oh,
I'll see you.
Thank you so much, Bill. I had a blast.